Hey guys, welcome back to SUP'S Garage. On this video, I'm gonna be showing you how to lower your 2016 to your 2022 ZX10R on the rear and a little bit on the front. Now I'm only gonna be lowering the rear by 2.5 inches. This is all you're gonna need, and as well as your lowering kickstand. I do wanna say I am going with the T-Rex bracket kit that also will be coming with the adjustable kickstand. And as far as the front goes, you'll see later on the video, I will be using some spacers from Brock's Performance, and I'll definitely will be leaving the links in the description for both of these parts. So other than that, let's get started. All right, so we're gonna start on the left rear set, and we're just gonna be removing these two bolts here, and we should get better access to the 3 bolts on the original brackets we're gonna have to change out. Now once you get those 2 bolts out of the way, just simply leave your rear set hanging down for now. So as you can see, I now have access to the back of the 3 bolts we're gonna have to remove. Now I need to move on to the right side of the bike to remove that rear set as well. Now as far as the right side goes, it's gonna be the same 2 bolts removed from the left side, but just one more bolt we also gotta remove, which is holding down the rear brake reservoir that we're also gonna have to get out of the way. Now I'm not sure if this is the original bolt for the reservoir, but in my case, I'm gonna have to use a 10mm to hold the nut behind this bolt. And now we can go ahead and move on to the 2 bolts holding the rear set. All right, so one thing I do want to mention when removing this rear reservoir, it's gonna have the spacer in the back. So be sure that you don't lose that. And in front of that spacer sits the reservoir and then the reservoir bracket that holds down the cap. All right, and for this side, I'm just gonna have a zip tie holding up this rear set for now. All right, now we have full access to the 3 bolts we're gonna have to remove. And of course, because we are lowering this bike, I'm gonna put a jack underneath the headers here that's also leveled with the oil pan, because once we get those 3 bolts removed, the frame and the swing arm will move independently once we get those brackets out. All right, so we can go ahead and start removing the 3 bolts that are holding down the original plates. I'm gonna start off by removing this back one here because that one seems to be the hardest. And I'm gonna have to use a swivel because I can't just use a straight extension because obviously the swing arm is in the way. And for the last 2, you're not gonna need a swivel. You can just simply use the extension and a socket. All right, now I'm just gonna use a long extension to tap these bolts out. But just keep in mind, once you remove those 3 bolts, the bike will be moving slightly. And again, I'm just gonna start off with the one on the rear because that one seems to be the hardest. All right, and once you tap them out enough, the first plate will be coming out. Also keep in mind, whatever you decide to tap it with, just be careful not to tap the threads on these bolts because you will be using these again. All right, so one of the main things I definitely want to share with you when you're taking these bolts off, it is going to help a lot if you raise the jack right where there's no more tension on all 3 of these bolts. Right now, I pretty much hit the sweet spot by going up and at the same time pulling on the bolt to find out where there's no tension on these components. As you can see here, these 2 bolts are still in. Now I already removed the back one by doing it that way. Now I can just simply pull these bolts out and remove the plate. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and install the new brackets to lower this bike. Now, because we're lowering this bike 2.5 inches, we're gonna be using this hole here. Now, if you only wanna lower it 1.5 inches, you'll be using this back hole right here. So now to put the new ones on, it's basically just reverse order. For installing the new plates on, make sure that these spacers are in there where they're supposed to be. Sometimes when removing the bolts, these tend to move and fall out. The very back one is gonna have this type of spacer, so just make sure that this is back in there as well. And obviously when putting those back in, just double check that there's no dirt on them. If so, just clean them out and slide them in. All right, now we can go ahead and install our first bracket on the right side. And I'm gonna be starting off by putting in the back bolt first. And if you do get confused on which bolt to use for which hole, all 3 bolts are the exact same. And if for some reason it's really hard to put this bolt back in due to it rubbing on the swing arm, you could just raise the jack a little bit and it'll give you a little bit more clearance just to slide in that bolt all the way in. Next, I'm gonna be putting back the bolt in the center, like so. And then now I'm slowly gonna be lowering the jack to be able to align the last hole that we're gonna use. Once you get it low enough, then just simply put the last bolt in. All right, now it's time to put the bracket on the left side. Again, I'm gonna be focusing on the back one first. Once we get that back one in, we can go ahead and center it with the center one. And once we get the 2 back ones in, go ahead and put the nuts on those. All right, so I still gotta tighten those back too. So now I'm gonna focus on that last one in the front, as you can see there. And I'm just gonna be pushing the bolt all the way over from the right side. And now we can put the last nut on. All right, so now it's time to go ahead and tighten all 3 bolts. And I'm gonna be starting with the one in the front. Now, because this is getting tightened back up, I'm gonna be using a ratchet on this side and a ratchet on the other side to make sure the bolt doesn't turn while I'm tightening it back up. All right, now moving on to the center one. All right, so the very back one's not gonna be as easy anymore. You can see now the right side of the bolt is actually behind the swing arm, and we have a little bit of room on the left side, but also the swing arm is in the way. So I'm gonna see what I could use to tighten that last one. All right, so for the right side, I'm gonna be using this little ratchet here just to hold the bolt while I tighten the left side. And luckily for me, I have this here that's long enough to reach in there to be able to tighten the nut. Now, to make this a lot easier, but it is gonna take a little bit more time, you can simply just remove the rear wheel and you'll definitely have full access to tighten up that bolt. But I'm gonna use my wrenches here to save me some time. Now we completely got the bracket on there, all tightened up at this point. Now we're just gonna go ahead and put our rear sets back on, starting on the right side. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and start off by putting on these 2 bolts first. All right, so I'm gonna be using the bolt, hold down the bracket, then next the reservoir, and then finally the spacer that goes in the back. And don't forget to put the nut behind the bolt. All right, now moving on to the left side, go ahead and also put back the 2 bolts holding this side rear set. All right, and since we're already on the left side of the bike, we're gonna go ahead and replace the original kickstand with the one that the T-Rex kit comes with. I'm gonna go ahead and start off by removing the spring. And I find that the kickstand springs have less tension when you have the kickstand in the up position. And as far as the spring goes, I like to use these kind of pliers because to me, it makes it a lot easier to get that spring out. Once you got that side removed, just pull up on it and you can get it out of the way. Now, before we remove the only bolt that's basically holding the kickstand to the bike, we're gonna have to remove this cotter pin out of the way. I'm gonna be using a flathead screwdriver to straighten it up first and then be able to pull it out. Once we got it pretty straight, we should be able to pull it out. All right, finally we can remove the bolt that's holding the kickstand at this point. And I'm gonna be using my wrench once again to get that bolt out. All right, and once you get the bolt out from the back side, there's gonna be this washer here. We just gotta pull that out in order to finally remove the kickstand out of the way. Just gonna be using a screwdriver here to pry behind it. Just pull this out, And at that point, the kickstand should just slide right out. All right, now we're just gonna reverse everything and using the new kickstand. And we're not gonna do any adjustments to this yet until the bike is fully lowered to where we want it. So we're gonna slide the kickstand in, and the way you know it, this is the front. It'll have this little tab here that's gonna slide in this bracket, like so. And then don't forget to put your spacer in from the back. Then go ahead and put your bolt back in. And if yours doesn't already have Loctite on it, it wouldn't hurt to put some when putting this back on. All right, now I got it as tight as I can by hand. So now I'm gonna go ahead and use the wrench. All right, so I find it really hard to put this cotter pin back in place. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna slide in the long part through the hole on the bolt, and the other side is just gonna stick out. Just like that. All right, now we're gonna be putting the long part of the screen hooked onto the top where it was, and now we're gonna have to attach the old spring onto the new kickstand. I'm gonna be using the same pliers I used earlier, just gonna pull back and slip it on. And now we got a working kickstand. All right, at this point, we could finally focus on lowering down the front. And again, we're gonna have to use some spacers for the stabilizers, which are gonna be these here, in order to lower the front just a little bit. And keep in mind, when lowering the front, you're gonna have to use a jack once again. Therefore, once everything is loosened, we just lower the jack and we set the height where we want it and tighten everything back up. So I'm gonna start off by removing this bolt here first, and then moving on to this one, because this is exactly where those two spacers are gonna go. All right, now moving on to this one here on the side. I do want to mention there's actually going to be two washers you're going to have to be careful with. One that goes underneath this part here, and also in the center, as you can see, the plastic one sticking out. So just be careful when removing the stabilizer out of the way to not drop those washers somewhere you're going to lose them. Starting off in the center, you're going to be putting the spacer in first, just like this. This will be towards the bottom, and this will be towards the top. Then you're gonna be reusing the plastic washer that came off of it, like so, and then the new bolt goes through the stabilizer and into the new spacer. Now I do wanna say on the spacer, it has kind of like an indentation. The part with the indentation will be going towards the stabilizer. The part that slightly sticks out will go towards the bottom. And it's gonna be pretty much the same thing for this one here. You're gonna be putting the spacer in, then the little washer that came out, and then the other new bolt that came with this kit. So I'm gonna be doing the center one first, and I am putting a little bit of Loctite just to be safe on both bolts. All right, so we're gonna be putting our spacer in first, then our plastic washer, and remember the indentation goes on top. And now we could put our stabilizer on top and put the bolt in. Now I'm not gonna be tightening this just yet because I do wanna make sure I'm able to put this one on. I'm just gonna put it snug for now. We're gonna put our spacer in, then our washer as well. And put our bolt through top of the stabilizer all the way down. All right, now that I got both of those snug, now I can go ahead and tighten both bolts. And just to show you the difference, as you can see here, we got about 1 inch clearance now, so we can raise these forks up and lower the bike. All right, so now it's time to loosen the triple tree, both top and bottom. Starting off with the top, we have this one here and also the handlebar one as well. Now we don't have to fully remove these, we just have to loosen them enough to be able to move this fork up. And it's gonna be the same for the right side and also the handlebar bolt. Can't really put the camera in there because the reservoir's in the way, but for the right side, we're gonna have to remove this bolt to be able to remove the reservoir out of the way and get full access to that bolt. Once you get all those loosened up on the top, then we can move down to the bottom triple tree. All right, I'm gonna be on the right side, starting with the reservoir. And for this, you're gonna have to use an Allen key and a wrench to hold the nut on the bottom of the bolt. And just be careful you don't drop the nut once it's loose. All right, now once you can move the reservoir, now you should have enough space to get to those bolts. And just remember, you don't have to remove it, you just gotta loosen it up. Now I'm gonna go ahead and loosen the handlebar. All right, now it's time to do the exact same thing on the left side. I'm gonna go ahead and start on the top triple tree bolt. And next, the handlebar bolt. All right, next we're gonna be focusing on the bottom triple tree. I'm gonna have to loosen these two here on the right side of the bike and the exact same thing on the left side. Now, I'm not gonna be able to show you this very well on camera, but you should be able to use the tool from the bottom side of the bike and as well as the top side of the bike. Because as you can see, you got more than enough space to be able to get your tool in there. All right, so I finally got all my bolts loose. Once you loosen the last bolts on both sides at the bottom of this triple tree, the forks are gonna go ahead and start moving just a little bit. So that's why be sure you have your jack already on the bottom of the bike. Just make sure it's raising the bike just a little bit, because if not, more than likely the bike is just gonna slam down as far as it can go, and you definitely don't want to do that. But now that everything's pretty much loosened in the front, now I can go ahead and slowly lower my jack, and the jack is slowly going to be lowering the bike down to where I want it to be adjusted at. And remember, I can only lower this so much because I'm going to have some clearance here for the stabilizer doesn't end up rubbing against the fork. So I'm going to go ahead and lower the jack now, and you'll see slowly the bike's going to start lowering down. And just in case you feel like you lowered the bike too far down, just raise the jack back up a little bit and use a mallet to tap down on those forks. All right, after you got the forks where you want them, just be sure that both forks are even on both sides before you start tightening everything back up. Since I'm already on the left side, I'm gonna go ahead and tighten the top triple tree bolt first, as well as the other side. Therefore, the forks don't move while I'm tightening all the other bolts. All right, now I'm gonna tighten the top triple tree on the right side. All right, since I'm already on the right side, I'm gonna go ahead and tighten down the handlebar. And then going back to the left side to tighten that handlebar as well. And the reason I haven't put the reservoir back just yet, because I find it a lot easier and more room being able to move this reservoir around to be able to tighten the right side of the bottom of the triple tree bolts. So at this point, go ahead and tighten the two bolts on the right side on the bottom, as well as the two on the left. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that right now real quick, because again, I don't have enough room to show you that on camera. All right, so I got the bottom triple tree taken care of. Now it's time to finally put the reservoir back on. All right, so the last thing we have to do is adjust this kickstand. And in order to do that, we just gotta loosen this bolt. Go ahead and remove the nut, and then remove the bolt. All the way out, like so. And as you can see here, there's gonna be different holes on the kickstand. You just choose whatever you're comfortable with as far as when your bike's on the kickstand. But in my case, I'm gonna be using the fourth hole because I'm pretty sure that's gonna be good enough for this bike. Just retighten the bolt back in. And you can go ahead and tighten the bolt all the way. Once you've done that, go ahead and put the nut on the other side and retighten that as well. And you're good to go. And there you have it, guys. That's how you lower your 2016 to your 2022 ZX10R Kawasaki. And that's gonna be it for this video, guys. Like always, if you like what you see, please hit that like for me and subscribe if you haven't already, if you like enjoying watching videos like this. And don't forget, God loves every single one of you guys. God bless you guys, and I'll see you on the next video.